Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us at Un Poquito Podcast. I'm Ricky Macias. Just a little reminder to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Un Poquito Pod. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be delicious. If you're listening on Spotify, they have a new feature where you can comment now. So if you leave your favorite moments in the episode, we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to rate and review on all audio platforms. If you'd like to support the show, you could join us on Patreon, where you'll get access to bonus content, our Minecraft server, and all sorts of cool stuff. Come join us on Discord. It's free. It's a place where people all over come to hang out and talk about their hobbies and their interests, from D&D to wrestling to probably even gardening. It's a lot of fun. We get into lots of antics and a lot of memes. Links for all those things are in the episode description. Thank you for all your support. Now enjoy the show.
Also, big announcement. May 29th, Don't Fly Comedy is back at PDA Space in Alhambra. It's going to be at 7 p.m. We know it's a Monday, but you get the day off, guys. It's going to be fun. Headlined by none other than Ricky Macias, hosted by me and Mario Rodriguez. We're going to be featuring Danielle Perez, Jesse Velasquez, Ash Casanova. All very funny. It's going to be a great time. If you're a patron at the highest level, you get free entry, whether it's live or live streamed. Tickets will be available online for $10 or $15 at the door. If you'd like to live stream, $5. All of the links to everything I just talked about is in the episode description. Thanks for being here, y'all. Enjoy the episode. Hey everybody, today's episode we talk about Blood In, Blood Out. After it has its 30-year anniversary, we thought it would be a good movie for us to watch and reflect on. Not all of us have seen it, or it's been a while since we've seen it, but it is a cult classic within the Latin community. It's a really good episode, really great discussion, but there's a couple things that we kind of gloss over, and one thing I noticed afterwards is we didn't really give a full plot summary. There's a lot of information to go over, and it's almost kind of too much to just get into. So what we're going to do is leave the link to the plot summary in the episode description for the movie's Wikipedia. You guys can check it out there so you get a better understanding of the movie. After the discussion, there's going to be an addendum at the end where I give my final thoughts. So make sure you watch to the end so you can get a little bit more of that reflection from me. Enjoy the episode, everybody.
Hello, I'm Ryan Reyes.
And I'm Dominic Angel.
And I'm Ricky Macias.
And together we are Un Poquito
Podcast.
Un Poquito Podcast, exploring Latino culture little by little.
Speaking of Latino culture, it's a big week for us, guys.
It really is.
We watched a long-ass fucking movie for this episode.
I watched it twice.
Why? You spent 6 hours of your life
Because I
watching.
thought we were going to watch it before we showed up, and then we watched it when we showed up, and I'm exhausted. 6 hours, I'm not getting back.
Folks, if you don't know, April 16th, 2023 was the 30-year anniversary of the cult classic cinematic masterpiece, Blood In, Blood Out. Directed by Taylor Hackford.
Also known by Bound by Honor.
Yep. Also know they changed the name.
I didn't know that.
Do you know why?
¿Por qué?
It's a Disney film.
Oh.
Blood In, Blood Out is Disney's official first R-rated film.
Before we get into it, Ryan, what would Blood In, Blood Out look like if one of the characters was replaced by Mickey Mouse? What if Popeye...
You're more... Wait, I'm going to cut you out like I cut out my leg.
Give me some chon-chon.
That's what I was looking for.
That was the line.
Give me some chon.
You're dead to me, just like Juanito.
That's the mom crying.
So,
You're under arrest.
That's Popeye.
what is your guys' history with this movie? Because, okay, so for people that don't know, I had the fucking stats in front of me, but this movie came out in 1993. I'm interested. I couldn't figure out like a source, a solid source on how the movie actually got made, but it looks like it came from the studio. Like, Disney produced this movie, but it was like their intention. They hired Taylor Hackford to produce it, and it was originally it was offered to Edward James Olmos, but he turned it down. But it's based off of
he almost got the job.
He almost had an opportunity.
So I didn't know that this movie is actually considered a cult classic, because like every Mexican I know like knows this movie. What did you guys grow up watching this, or?
No, but I grew up like knowing that it was like people would mention it, and I, looking back after watching the movie twice, I realized that there had been times where people were referencing it, and I didn't know. I just thought that was a thing Latinos like said.
Give me some choncho.
Yeah, like I heard chonchon a lot as a kid, and I didn't know what it was a reference to.
I was like, what kind of food is that? Yeah,
that was a direct lead into Choncho. Give me some sweats.
Give me some.
I need to borrow some sweats.
I heard it like you. I heard it referenced a lot. I didn't watch it until I was like 17 or 18. Like I was like almost out of high school, and it showed up on like I don't know, I forget what channel, maybe Comedy Central. You know, they just put random movies on.
Yeah.
Late at night, and I watched. I thought I didn't know what I was in for. I was like, it was a school night, and I was like, yeah, I'll just watch this movie before bed. But I just kept staying up until
It's a 3-hour film.
It's a 3-hour movie.
I'm gonna be honest. For most of like my teen and like young adult life, I thought I had seen this movie, but I thought that American Me was two different movies. Like I was using a certain sequence of events, like certain scenes I would connect to American Me, and then other scenes I would connect to Blood In Blood Out. But I was just referencing American Me in my head.
Yeah, I
didn't realize I had never seen this movie until like 2021, I want to say. We watched it for Isimo, and I was like, oh shit, I have not seen any of this.
Yeah. Which is ironic too, because Blood In Blood Out is also a lot shorter than it's supposed to be. Its original inception, like, the movie was supposed to be 5 hours long. That was their intention.
The original cut was 330 minutes long.
Damn, that's some Lord of the Rings shit right there.
I mean, honestly, this would have made a good trilogy. I think that they should have. I mean, this movie's already 3 hours. I feel like they could have made a really good trilogy.
Yeah.
Blood In, Blood Out, Blood In again.
I think the second and third one would have sucked. It was
It's the same movie, just cut up, so it's not as fucking long.
The second movie's just him struggling for work. Like,
because like where would the first one have ended?
It's a rom-com.
The first part one would have ended like when the brother gets shot and he goes to jail, and that's just it.
Oh yeah, and the second one would be him in jail, and the third one would be him trying to stay reformed and then ending up back in jail and taking over.
Yeah.
That sounds dope.
yeah, you know what? It's better than The Hobbit. What they did with The Hobbit, for sure.
True.
This movie's long as fuck. I feel like they could have cut it into 3 movies and it would have been good. I mean, if it was supposed to be 5 hours originally, like that's 3 good movies, probably. Here's the thing. We got to get it out of the way. This movie is campy as fuck. Like it is like super, most of the acting, the majority of the acting is like super hammy and like a lot of like silliness throughout.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even the turnaways are just so dramatic. Like,
Yeah. That's what I thought of too. He was like,
I need to show the camera I'm disappointed right now.
I'm cutting you off like I cut my leg.
What's interesting is like the stuff that I was reading about said that this movie is like a cult classic in the Latino community, which is just like, it's weird to say that something that is like liked by an entire demographic is like a cult, has a cult following. That would be like saying like, I don't know, tacos have a cult following. Like, you know what I mean? Mm. That wasn't a good example, but that's the idea of like, this is part of like the community enjoys it. It's weird. It's weird to say that it's a cult following. It's like saying that like, oh, Latinos, like whatever they like is weird.
They're always trying to contribute everything to witchcraft.
Hey everybody, we want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Legacy Teas and Spices, which is a company run by our mom, Angel Mesco, who's here with us today.
Hey guys, I just wanted to mention we have several medicinal teas in stock. A lot of people have been asking, and so I just wanted to mention we have an immune system to help boost your immune system. We have a stress-free tea. We have a good night tea that helps with sleep. We have turmeric ginger that helps with inflammation. We have a detox that's a cleansing tea. We have a digestive aid. We also have a weight management tea. We're all trying to get healthy right now, and with a proper diet and some exercise, these teas can really help you out. We have different sizes, and today we're holding up, this is like a starter size. It's a $12.95, but with your code you get the discount. And this can give you about 12 servings, give or take, depending on how much you use. But this is all artisan, hand blended by myself. And yeah, we have many flavors. Check out our website. Using UP23 at checkout so that we know you came from watching Un Poquito podcast. It gets them 23% off their entire purchase online at legacyteasandspices.com. All right, thanks you guys. Thanks for having me. Thanks you guys.
But also one thing that I learned in like just doing quick research right now was that this movie, so Disney Studios hired Ross Thomas to write this script. So this was like a top-down approach to like, most of the time when we see movies like this, like it's somebody that's like trying to get this made, like there's a push for it. Like La Bamba was like the brother, was the guy that was like, we need to make this movie about my brother. You know, there's a lot of movies that we see in like Latino cult classics or community classics that are like made by people trying to make these movies. What's interesting about this was they were like, look, we got all these crime movies, we got like these epic gangster movies, we have The Godfather, we got to tap into the Latino market. And like they hired a bunch of people, the director, I forgot his first name, but his last name is Hackford, and the writer, Ross Thomas, were hired by the studios, and they were the ones that like approached Edward James Olmos. He was originally tapped to like direct and star in it, I believe, but he turned it down for whatever reason. And they reached out to a few people, and then it finally landed with the director that it had, and then they got this like lesser known names as the cast.
At the time, anyways.
Yeah,
I recognize a lot of faces in that movie.
Dude, there's so many
yeah.
people in this movie. There's like a lot, like Ving Rhames, fucking Biff from Back to the Future. Who else was in it?
So many.
Danny Trejo.
Danny
Trejo.
Trejo. He's in every movie about Mexicans.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
but
he's got to be.
Yeah.
Shark Boy Lava Girl, bro.
Wait, that's George Lopez.
Huh?
No, he was in Spy Kids.
Spy Kids. There you go.
But how do you guys feel about that? Like, I don't know. Do you think that makes a difference? Because it's like it didn't come from the community, but like it's been widely accepted by the community. And I think that, I think his name's Thomas Hackford or Taylor Hackford. But the director originally wanted, like, he set out to like, to make a movie for this community, which is, to me, is a little interesting because
Taylor Hackford.
Taylor Hackford, yeah, see, I knew. So Taylor Hackford set out to make this movie like for Latinos because he was like, that's the demographic that's coming out of Los Angeles. So if you make a crime movie in Los Angeles, it should feature Latinos, which is kind of a weird, like, racist thing to say.
If there's any crime in this city, it's happening by Latinos. And that should be reflected.
But I think that's a big part of why, like you were saying, right, Josh, the American, was saying when we were watching it that like a lot of the acting is bad and you blame the director for bad acting.
For sure, it's terrible.
And I think that might be why, like, that's like the stories you hear of like Mexican actors going into auditions and be like, can you do it a little bit spicier?
Yeah.
They're like, can you like be more fucking like cholo
Mexican.
about it, like more
Yeah.
Mexican?
Can you throw
about
some
it?
more carnals in there?
Because, you know, the execs who have to approve this are not Latinos.
Right.
So they need to think that this is what Latino people act like.
Well, that's
Yeah.
part of why there was so many change. That's the funny thing is like the 3-hour version is cut down, but it's cut in a way to accommodate the producers because it was supposed to be what's that term for like multiple stories in one long-standing film? Allegory?
No.
Vignettes.
Vignettes. It was supposed to be not like vignette necessarily, but
It's
that
not-
style
It's
of
not. It's separated by
you
dates.
you do see that in this film, but the original version was it was supposed to focus more on Paco than it was on Miklo, but B, it was supposed to also include a lot more about the brother. There was like 2 other people that they were supposed to talk about, and it was supposed to be like the different aspects of the same community and how it affects people different ways, and how they struggle. In fact, Paco's original struggle was supposed to be him hating his community and then like living with Latina, with his girlfriend and her trying to get him to like realize that family is important, that community is important, and she was supposed to be the one that points out to him that the way he's behaving towards his own community is in a way toxic.
Yeah, I wish we would have seen more of his story in the film, because he does play a huge part of like this concept of like the Latino struggle in Los Angeles. And I feel like I did like the parts that he was in, but there wasn't enough to make him feel like a substantial character. And then he's in most of the ending, and it's like, well, why do I give a shit what this guy has to do? You know?
Right, like your only reference for him is when he's being an asshole. And then,
Yeah.
And then he's in the rest of the film. Yeah, I think it was I can't say for sure that it was because it was a Disney, like because it was like the rep, like you were saying, like the reps aren't Latino, that they pushed for the white guy to be the main character, but that is kind of like, it would make sense.
Yeah, it's like, we'll make a movie all about Mexicans if the Mexican is white.
It's like
Right.
it's like Last of the Mohicans.
Oh yeah. Well, but actually, also like that doesn't mean like any hate to that actor, because he is actually half Mexican.
Japa.
Yeah, Damien Chapa, that fool like reps like Los Angeles hard.
Yeah, he was in a bunch of films where that was like all he promoted was like he's pro Chicano, pro Latino. He always plays a Latino.
It's like we get it, you know.
Like he didn't even have to act. That was him trying as hard as he could to prove he was Mexican.
I am.
How did you feel about like a white character? He's kind of the lead in the the majority of the movie focuses on him.
I think when I watch movies, I watch it with the production in mind. So I think it was a smart move because it's a protagonist that more than just Latino people could relate to.
Right.
White people can see themselves as this person too, so they can relate. Which
But
is
you're
like
not. Stop it. I'm just kidding.
which is a hard thing for people when they're making movies. They try and make characters as generic as possible, so that everyone can identify with it.
They're doing the what's that that vampire movie Twilight, where they make the main character as like bland as possible.
I relate to Miklo's character a lot, even though I know like I talk a lot of shit about white people. But as like somebody that grew up not speaking Spanish and has like not felt Mexican enough, I do relate a lot to like white Latinos and like biracial people that like feel like they're not enough. Because that was a big part of his story of just like always having to prove himself for every person and them not being accepted because he doesn't look the part.
Yeah.
It's literally like one of the last lines of the film. And it's the funniest thing ever. You still can't see past my fluorescent skin, huh? He's a vampire.
Some people just can't see past that fluorescent skin, you know.
Because it's too bright.
Cut.
Yeah.
Up.
Dominic's racist against white
It
people. Is what I'm trying
did.
to say.
I like the way he says the line.
I got a white person on my shirt.
A dead white person.
She's smiling.
She's smiling at her.
Yeah, dude. It's
She's enjoying. No,
You don't understand how racist that is.
We're going.
Everybody watch the Ember Knight show. It's really good.
But I like the way he delivers that line because it almost sounds like he's bragging, like you hate me because I have beautiful skin and glowing blue eyes and perfect hair.
Yes.
It's funny.
So this movie performed terribly at the box office.
No, obviously.
It had a $35 million budget.
For real?
Yeah, $35 million. Well, it makes sense. A lot of that money probably just went to just fucking filming in San Quentin. But it only made $4.5 million domestically. It was a major flop. But the two biggest things about that were that Disney had them change the title, so the film was actually released under the title Bound by Honor. I mean, Blood In, Blood Out is cool, but that's actually like a gang mantra.
Yeah.
Which is why they had him change it. But it was because the this movie came out in '93, right after the LA riots. So
Yeah.
Disney was like, "Hey, we don't want to be responsible for like sparking any gang violence."
Yeah, it's
It's-
literally
Which
about
is like
gang
so
wars.
funny. They're like, we need a pro Latino movie. This is good. And then the riots happen.
Which makes sense. Like,
I mean,
it's
it
such
makes
a touchy
sense-
subject for a time where people's like lives are getting destroyed.
It makes
Yeah.
sense in theory, but I mean, look, when I first saw when I first watched Goodfellas, I thought that like, oh, it's glorifying like gangster lifestyle, right? Like, because all of the people that I was around were just like a bunch of teenagers. They all liked, that was the coolest part of the movie to them. And then it wasn't until like a few years ago when I watched it as an adult and there's all that heavy-handed like anti-gang,
Yeah.
anti-violent stuff at that. And I was like,
This
oh,
fool's a rat.
yeah.
We're talking about that. We're talking about that movie, right? That's the right one, Goodfellas.
Yeah.
With what's his name?
Ray Liotta.
Yeah.
But this movie is not like it's not pro gang, like it's not pro violence. There's a lot of characters. So like I was reading this article that was written by, and it was in a blog. It wasn't a major publication, but it was like this person who goes by Sarlos Rivera, which is a shout out. Look
Call
it
out.
up. Look it up. The guy that wrote this, like, it's just like a blog post. It's an article. I don't want to diminish like what he's doing, but he wrote this article that was essentially, it's an opinion piece about like being confused as to why this movie is so popular. And to be honest, I'm not closely tied with like the popularity of the movie or like the cult fandom surrounding it. But it's just like a really weird article that's like, why do people like these characters? They're rapists and they're drug dealers and like they're violent and all this stuff. And it is a weird take because one, the movie itself doesn't, in my opinion, it definitely doesn't glorify like the lifestyle. It depicts it in a weird way sometimes. It's very homoerotic and like there's a lot of machismo shit in it, but like every step of the way there's one person, there's constant reminders from multiple characters that are like, hey, this isn't the way to do things. There's a better way to do things. Even fucking Montana, who is a gang leader, like he's killed off because he's seen as weak, because throughout the movie he's like, no, we can't be fighting each other. No, we shouldn't be selling drugs to our own community. We shouldn't be hurting each other. Like gangs are supposed to be for protecting our people and not for hurting them.
Yeah, he's like, let's talk about our feelings, and then he died.
Yeah.
He's like, you can only speak if you're sharing the feeling stick, and then someone stabbed him with the feeling stick.
It's just a really weird thing where like, it's so weird that I don't want to be super sensitive and say that like Mexican movies, Mexican American Chicano cinema is like is put under a microscope for like its violence and drug dealing, depicting drugs and violence. But like classic cinema there's like multiple gangster movies that are considered classic cinema.
Yeah.
You know, Goodfellas, The Godfather, The Sopranos is one of the best TV shows of all time.
But the way people talk about The Departed, like no one judges that. That's just a movie about people getting shot in the head. How many
Everyone
headshots?
dies from a bullet wound to the head. Every single character. Now I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, every single one of them.
At least in this movie, he gets shot in the leg. Come on.
I've only seen the scene in The Departed where everybody dies.
Yeah.
The ending.
The
That's all
best
you need
part.
to know.
Spoilers, I guess.
Real quick aside about The Departed is, did you know that somebody made a Kickstarter so that he could digitally remove the rat at the end of the movie, and he was going to make like a bunch of like DVD copies for anybody that contributed to the Kickstarter and just send people DVDs? Because apparently for fans of the movie, they're like, this is a perfect movie except for the fucking rat at the end, which is like a heavy-handed like, oh, he was a rat the whole time.
The Simpsons does my favorite parody joke of that, where they have an episode essentially where it's retelling The Departed, but it's about school children, and it's about like tattletales instead of like rats. And then they have a rat cross the wall at the end, just like in the movie, and Ralph pops out of a trash can. That represents symbolism. Oh, but I wanted to speak briefly on the whole like glorifying gang life thing, and I feel like people misunderstand these films regardless of whether like what community they're depicting.
Regardless.
Because like rewatching these movies as an adult, I'm realizing that most of them, especially like Goodfellas and Blood and Blood Out, weren't glorifying it. They were very specifically like heavy-handedly saying, no, these are bad guys. You're not supposed to inspire. But I think what's happening with younger generations, and this is why it starts at a younger life in real life, is they're seeing depictions of struggles they actually go through, and then they're seeing somebody find a way to succeed regardless. I swear. If you remove the sentimental point from mine for that stupid Freddie Soto joke.
I think that we're out of the era of hood. Like, we don't get too many hood movies anymore, and I'm glad. They were bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of stuff. There's still movies. I can't even think of a recent one, but like the last one that I could think of that kind of is like hood adjacent is the movie Dope. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, so like that, a movie like that shows like, yeah, there's still people like that are in the lifestyle. There are still, but it's being told from people. Even like fucking This Fool is like hood adjacent.
Yeah.
And it's showing these people as a reality of the environment, but it's not.
It's not some like pure hood shit though. It's like they make cupcakes.
Yeah. But I mean, hugs not thugs.
Yeah, I'm saying though that they're being reflective of the fact that it's not like a blood-in lifestyle anymore. Like,
yeah, that lifestyle.
I know that's still a thing, but
I feel like it's just translated back into shows. Like they're just finding newer versions of, like, I know that there have been some low budget releases that have come out, especially like on Netflix, like The Irishman. There's 2 movies with Irish gangsters, but one of them is Robert De Niro and one of them is anyway, they still make movies, but they don't do as well, so they come out like straight to video. They come out, but like television shows are still trying to tell those stories. Like after The Sopranos, there was Breaking Bad, there was Boardwalk Empire, there's Snow on FX, there's there's the Sons of Anarchy.
It's true.
I think there's still a lot of crime cinema or crime media, but there's not so much more of this like. In particular, for like black and brown cinema, there's no like hood crime.
That's what I was about to say. I think it's more about drug dealing, those shows, than it is about being a gangster.
Yeah, there's no like the gangster media has definitely died down, and I think a big part of that is just that like that culture is like dying out as people get more opportunities. That's the big thing about like that's kind of the crux of this movie is like these people dealing. Like we were talking earlier about how in that article that I read by Sarlos was that like he was saying that Paco was depicted as a villain because he was the antagonist for. Honestly, I feel like this guy just like doesn't know how to watch movies.
I honestly don't disagree with that though.
I don't think that he was seen. I don't think that as a third party, the movie itself is not saying that Paco's a bad guy.
I could see how somebody that has like. That's a little more hood or a little more street would see him as a bad guy though. Like I could imagine I've known people that have watched this movie and side with Miklo or the painter. I see eye to eye a lot with everything that painter says. I feel like I'm like, this fool's on it, dude. This fool knows what he's talking about.
Well, the painter
Cruz.
Yeah, I forget how they're broken down in most stories, but there's always like 3 important. Isn't there? There's like a trilogy of not main protagonists, but when a movie or a story is about a group rather than an individual, there's like 3 people that always show up. There's the leader, the good guy, the bad guy, and the Jesus character. And I think Cruz is supposed to be the Jesus character. I think that's intentional, especially like how he does that monologue at the end of the film of like, regardless of what's happening, these are things happening to us. These aren't, it's not just us making choices. Like these are things actively happening to us, and the best way to get through them is to hold on to community and work together.
Yeah, I don't think that Paco was the villain of the movie. I can see how people would see that, especially if they have a certain mindset that seem like they would say like, fuck that dude, like he's a sellout.
That fucking chorizo.
But I wouldn't say that he was a villain. I think like he's also in the circumstance that everybody else is in, and I think that that's what the movie was trying to portray. That is like, this is how fucking white supremacy affects people in this community.
Yeah.
Because it is about options, right? And like there's a lot of toxicity in what Paco does. Like you could say like he's trying to clean up the streets. He's making the decision to not be a drug dealer, right? But he's like hating the people in his community.
Because he hates himself.
Yeah.
Right. Because he blames himself for all the stuff that's happened. I
Well,
mean,
he
it's a
didn't
big
come to terms with that until the end of the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Spoilers.
he's doing it internally. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's like
Spoilers on a 30-year-old movie.
because like the Cruz thing, like saying essentially he was saying like there is beauty despite all of this. Like he's kind of saying that too. Like part of it's like you have to accept everything that's happened in order to have any joy or peace or forgiveness for yourself. Is kind of what he's
Right.
doing, and it's like because it all if you if you're gonna not let go of things, everything's gonna suck, and you have nothing to look forward to, and that's kind of what Miklo's doing. Also, I think, like in a way, he's not. He was refused because he verbally says this. It's like this isn't how it should be, and he's not wrong. Like he says that out loud multiple times in the movie. It's like this isn't how it should be, and it's like yeah,
Yeah, because he was fed something going into the gang culture is like, oh, we're all supposed to be there for each other and we're all supposed to be having each other's back. And then to him, everybody that he's supposed to count on is turning their back on him or they're betraying him in some way, like with fucking Popeye, you know.
Well, the real core of that, we're talking about Miklo, right?
Yeah, we're talking about
the real
Miklo.
core of that is his self-hate. He hates his white dad.
yeah,
Yeah.
And he loves his Latino mama.
yeah.
Latina mama.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the thing of
Yeah.
like he wanted to lean on this community, but because he's perceived as white Latino, he is pushed out initially and then has to prove himself. And then once he thinks that he's finally found his community. His entire struggle the whole movie is him trying to find validation in that community. And then it isn't until he absorbs the worst parts of it that he finally gets that. And so that's how he sees the world from now on.
Facts.
And his story is supposed to, like you said it earlier while we were watching it, like I do believe and agree with you that his story is supposed to be like a tragic ending of like, this is who he is now. He and more so because I know that they compared it in the article. He's more so a Darth Vader character than Popeye was,
I mean, yeah. He lost his leg.
which is so funny. Yeah, it's like there's so many analogies, and it's made by Disney. It's like he is kind of
That's
like
so funny.
a Mexican Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, Miklo's story in Blood and Blood Out is like super interesting because he is the one that keeps going back to like this life of crime, and he's the one that struggles a lot with his identity. Like what?
I'm sorry, I was just laughing because when we were watching the movie, I made the joke about Anakin because of when he comes to the apartment. It reminded me of the scene Anakin Skywalker went back to the thing or whatever, and the guy's like, "Hey, little Annie."
Queen. I made it. Entra. Hey, welcome to the barrio, Holmes.
Miklo keeps going back to a life of like to that lifestyle, but the thing is that again, why I think his ending is so tragic is because there is that period where he's trying to go straight. Like he sees his ways. He sees how like being involved in crime, being in a gang is not all it's cracked up to be, and that like it's gonna get him killed. So then he's like, let me fucking get my life right and do things the quote unquote the right way. But even through that, they make it so hard for people to actually reform their lives. You know, he's forced to stay in this fucking shithole with a bunch of people. He has no privacy. They don't respect that he's trying to live right. And his fucking job, he has to work like brutal hard labor. He's working a ton of overtime. His boss is stealing from him, and there's nothing he can do about it because, especially in that time, it's just like, who are the cops going to believe, this Mexican fool or the white, owner? And so like, he's living under constant like fear that he's going to go back to prison. So he reaches that breaking point, which is what we hear a lot from people with felonies, people that go to prison for petty crimes, and when they come out, they're not equipped to live, the straight man lifestyle. So a lot of them just go back because that's the only life that they know, that they're comfortable with, that they can excel at. And like that's when he is getting dug in deeper and deeper into this like gang lifestyle mentality. That's when he's like, there's a lot of order, there's a lot of structure, and there's a code of ethics and honor to live by. And I think that's what works for him, because on the outside world it's like, no, there's no ethics or honor.
Nope.
Yeah, he even says that to Paco at one point when he calls him. He's like, there's a lot of opportunities where this can go wrong, but I'm going to try my best. He says something like that, where he's like explaining to him, like, I'm out now, I'm trying to stay straight. A lot of, like, he acknowledged from the get-go that these things were prevalent, but he was hoping that the people that were close to him that were supposed to be his network would be there for him. And he even criticizes Paco because he believes that he's going against that by disowning his brother for being an addict.
Yeah, there's it's the three acts of the story are actually really interesting, because it is the beginning, middle, and end of like, the beginning is they're all in the lifestyle, and then they're all affected by, that event where Miklo gets shot, they get in a car accident, Cruz gets addicted to drugs, and then so they go their own ways for a little bit, come back, and now they're all facing the moment of having to challenge that, and they all challenge that in their own, they all cope with that in their own ways, and then at the end going back into it and figuring out like,
It's crazy. Really is all Paco's fault, dude. His fool challenged that fool to go out there and beat those fools up at the bar. Remember, got him all hyped up and wouldn't even go himself, dude. Chum, dude, fool's a chum.
Mikla's ending is really interesting to me, because it is a tragic ending. Like and I think they play it that way. Like the music is very intense, and they do like these like crazy intimate close-ups, and he, spoilers for everybody that hasn't seen the movie, this 30-year-old movie, but like, he kills Montana, which is like his mentor, and he does it in the name of the community of La Onda, and like he does something drastic to hold together this idea that he's been given. It almost reminds me of the ending for movies like Whiplash or like Black Swan.
I was gonna say, we made that joke earlier, but it is a Black Swan moment.
Yeah, there's like that crazy Black Swan moment where he's so obsessed with this concept that he was willing to break himself apart and give up everything that he had. He literally gave up his fucking leg. He's been shot multiple times. He gave up his family, and now he gave up his mentor so that he could obtain this like concept. And when Magic like expresses like, I would give my life I give my life to you, Jefe. He calls him Jefe, and that's the moment where it's like that fucking sudden realization of Miklo, he's made it. Like he's in this, and it's like they're supposed to be crying over Montana about like this loss of like doing what they had to do for La Onda, but I really think it's like that Black Swan moment of like he's finally achieved perfection, and it's overwhelming for him.
Yeah, sacrificing yourself as an individual to reach that validation of what you believe you were like searching for. I do think it was funny that the symbolism for him giving up on a clean life is him breaking up soap.
Literally washing his hands of the
Literally washing his hands of the clean life.
I did not put that together.
He's destroying soap.
He's destroying a clean life.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
But his hands remain dirty.
But yeah, I mean, all of them. And that's what it takes. It takes fucking Cruz, like, going through all his shit and, like, finding... I mean, to me, he did the worst thing, which was let his brother die.
Well, I mean, he didn't let his brother die. It was an accident. He told the brother to get out of here.
Yeah,
Well, they didn't listen.
I mean, as a kid.
Yeah, but
you leave a bag of hot Cheetos out, and you're like, hey, don't eat the hot Cheetos.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing as heroin needles.
And then you...
I believe it's described
What's more
as
enticing?
criminal negligence.
Wait.
Criminal negligence.
Where he allows the opportunity to be in his environment.
Sound like a pig,
He
dog.
brought that...
Sound like a narc fool.
All of a sudden, Josh hates
Man,
cops,
y'all,
huh?
No, I'm just joking.
Josh is pro cop, but he's fuck 12 all the way.
Now you get it.
Real
But I mean,
complex.
But I mean, like,
Complex.
he's had I don't know. It's not a competition, but like Cruz's character goes through a lot of trauma. Like he fucking gets his back broken, gets addicted to drugs, then his
But
fucking
it's all Paco's fault. Paco got his back broken because he told that dude to go beat that dude up, and then they caught that fool slipping because he was chilling with the lady by himself. He was like, "I'm gonna break away from the group," which is something you never do when you're in a gang.
And in a way, kind of, but it's also like they're all these dumb kids in this shitty situation.
Yeah.
I
And
think
then-
that's the thing. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt,
I
but
interrupted
I
you,
think that's the thing to remember too is that even though everybody is fucking 36-year-old throughout the whole movie, they are supposed to be 18 years old, and so
Yeah.
it's a lot easier, I think, to like look at them and be like, why are you making such stupid decisions? But if they had age appropriate actors that were actually, I mean, I don't know if they were, but they look old as shit.
They were 18 in the first part. 'Cause
Yeah, at the beginning.
right at the very after the,
Yeah,
in the
when
second
Paco-
part, they were already immediately older.
But
Yeah,
when
but-
Paco has them beat up that dude
Yeah,
and all
they're
that stuff
kids.
goes down, they're all 18, like they're all kids.
Yeah,
And even later, when they get out, you know, he was only gone for
5-7 years.
oh, is it 5 years? That is a
When
while.
he gets out, it's 7 because that's after Miklos gets shot. Paco fights with Cruz.
I mean-
and he brings that up like after 7 years of not visiting me, I kind of gave up on that.
So yeah, I mean, they are adults. You know, towards the end of the movie, they're in their late 20s, but even then, it's still like that is still prime, like fucking growing up. Their brains haven't even finished forming. You know what I mean? Like,
They're hurtled down a path
yeah.
so quickly. Like, what are the opportunities to process any of it? Like, let alone real traumas that they keep occurring, and then to process any of it. Like, good
Yeah.
luck.
And that's a big
Yeah.
part of Cruz's speech at the end of just like, we have to learn how to move on. We have to accept everything that happened to us when we were kids and like accept each other and support each other and move on from this stuff.
That's also a huge component, I believe, of like of crime themed films is like they always pick adult actors, but they almost always start these actors when they're like fresh out of high school, because that's the reality of gang life in any aspect. Is it always starts when you're really young, and as that like these gangs that are developing are all between like 14 and 18 years old.
Yeah. I think one thing that was really interesting that sets Blood and Blood Out apart from other like gangster or crime movies is that in particular with movies like Goodfellas is that there's the aspect of like we talk about how everybody has choices, right? And I would say that in this movie the class issue of like being poor, not just being poor, but being Latino in like a racist time period played a huge part in these characters' decision making and like their lifestyle, because it was directly referenced throughout. I mean, in prison, it's the gang wars with the cops. It's Paco telling like the other department, like, do you know these? Do you speak Spanish? Have you been in a gang? Do you know these people? You know, like there's a lot of that throughout. Even with Cruz when he has the art show. I also actually no, to be fair, because Josh brought this up when we were watching it about how like they were playing the white people as like assholes, but I don't think in that scene I will be fair and say that I don't think that they were really depicting white people as the assholes. But I do think that what they were doing was showing how uncomfortable like Latinos are in white spaces. And I think a coping mechanism is what's his name? Ernie?
Yeah, I just know him as Ernie.
Frank and the other fool, like they go in their way of, and I've seen this a lot. That's why I think it rings true, is that a lot of people act out more when they're in spaces like this. They take it less seriously and they joke around. And because they're used to, it's almost like what is it called?
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy type thing.
I
Self-fulfilling
know what you mean.
prophecy.
Self-sabotage.
Self-sabotage. There's a word that's like on the tip of my tongue. It's something strike.
Preemptive.
Yeah, whatever. It's like preemptive of like they're going in thinking that they're going to be judged. In a way, they kind of are, but they weren't being mistreated. And like, but yeah, they are.
If anything, they were getting the pass. Like they were being extra cool with them.
Yeah.
If they were being random people on the street acting like that, they would have got the police called on them quick. But they were being like, dude, like, it's just an artist, everyone. Like,
Right, like she's still trying to save.
Yeah, she's saving face for him.
Yeah.
Gave him some money out of her own purse.
Yeah.
She was cool as hell. He had the microaggressions.
Yeah, there wasn't any white microaggressions against them, but I do think, I mean, not to give them a pass or treat, Latinos with kid gloves, but I do think, like I said, I think it rings true because it does show that kind of discomfort in spaces like that. Like they're not in a space. Yeah, he has an art show and that's a really good opportunity for him, but they're unable to have that opportunity within their own community. They have to go somewhere else.
Even I will say there's one point that leans towards that where his friends are trying to get in and they're being rejected even though they're like actual components of the art itself.
There is that.
Don't matter. Rules are rules.
They have tickets.
Rules are rules. No, they didn't have tickets.
They
He
didn't have
stole it from
tickets.
somebody who was walking in.
Oh.
He was acting crazy.
They didn't steal it. They just like.
Nah,
It was
dude,
a
he
thing of,
acting
like-
crazy. Dude. He
But
scared
it was
that poor
also a
lady.
thing of like no one thought to invite the actual muses of the art, just
No.
the artist. And the
No.
artist is only there to perform sort of a character of like the people get to meet the artist and feel
No,
more
this is
close to
hilarious.
the
No,
stuff
dude, they
they're
were
doing.
being crazy. They weren't allowed in because the people who were throwing the show were trying to sell these paintings and they wanted to make
Right.
money. And they knew that these guys are some street dudes who are going to come in here and act a fool. Yeah, 100%. He knew.
I mean,
Cruz knew.
Yeah, but they could have just ate the shrimp.
He immediately came through and was like, guys, like, they're cool, but like, dudes, you gotta. And then he went and got faded with them, and then.
But
Cruz,
again,
dude,
like
Cruz
that
piece of shit.
again, what I think it is, the way that I view all of that, right, is you're not wrong that they were acting up. But again, I do think that stems from a place of like having to act proper for the whites, like having to play monkey for them.
Okay, I understand.
And like, you know what I mean?
I know what you're saying, but I don't like when you add for the whites, because we should be acting with respect for each other.
You're not wrong.
You know what I'm saying? We shouldn't be acting a fool or doing crazy. I understand having fun. You know what I mean? It's me. You know what I mean? I know how to have fun.
But to that point, like I'm not saying. Again, I'm saying I'm not the white people in that, because it is a white space. The staff was white.
It's a Latino show.
There's no Latinos in attendance. Like,
Just the artist.
again, I'm saying in that scene, I don't think necessarily that the white people were being depicted as being confrontational or
No, yeah.
being condescending
For sure
or
not.
being the bad white people. I do think it does show the discomfort of being Latino in those spaces and of having to feel like you need to code switch to be in front of this community and not being. It does look. I'm not saying that it's not wrong to be like, oh, my friends are going to act out and embarrass me. I hope they don't embarrass me. But it also is something of like having to worry about how your friends and your people are going to be perceived in a space like this. Because, look, benefit of the doubt, and this is me probably being very generous to Frank and the other guy, I forget his name, but his friends, is like, it could very well have been fine if Cruz was able to invite a group of friends, a group of people that could come in and be like, hey, like, be real stern with them and be like, be on your best behavior, but they're accepted. There wasn't a confrontation until they weren't allowed in, right? They could have just come and they might have been joked around. They might have done whatever, but like, there is a world that exists possibly in which they were allowed in and maybe they goofed off a little bit, but they didn't help. They didn't facilitate like him ruining the show.
And yeah, maybe it is a little bit like, I don't know. I guess it's wrong to be like, oh, you guys are dressed in your street clothes and everyone here is dressed nice. Like, you can't come in here dressed like this kind of thing. I don't know if that's bad, but that's a thing for art world. They're at a fancy thing.
Yeah, but it's also the thing of like
I I was saying that if they came in dressed nicer and they were being respectful and they were like, hey, we're friends of the artist, we're featured. But it doesn't seem like that's what they did.
Yeah, but their clothes are clean. They
clothes
have the crease in the pants.
Yeah.
Like they are dressed nice.
I kind of-
They're just not dressed nice.
No,
They're just
no.
not dressed nice for the white people there.
I will say that they were dressed up to go out. Like they were dressed up for an event. In comparison to the rest of like how we see them in the rest of the movie, in that scene, like they're dressed like they're like, I'm gonna look good for this thing.
I actually wanted to talk about this. Wait, go
Literally,
ahead.
that one dude is not wearing a shirt any other scene in the film.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually did want to talk about this because I think Cruz, I think that he was the flyest dressed in the movie, dude. He was dressed sharp in that scene, that art scene.
Yeah.
I was like, he had a cane, right? Did he have a cane there?
Yeah.
Killing
I
it.
mean-
Dude, bro was killing it with
It was
that.
more of a crutch with the arm brace.
Was it a crutch? I thought it was a cane.
Oh.
He has a cane later in the film, but it's a crutch
Oh.
at first.
That outfit he had on was fire, though. One where he was like, I only have $10 to my name. but he was just fire. But I
mean-
think throughout the whole movie, Paco was...
Well, yeah,
he's killing it, dude.
Paco is the one with the money. He's the only one with like a steady job.
I mean,
like,
But that's also
clearly.
going back to what you were saying about Cruz. That's part of what I mean is like I don't think in that scene they're necessarily being an antagonist, but the elements of the understanding of that environment are there. Of like she got him those clothes for the event. She helped him get dressed up, and not to say that he's playing the monkey, but I'm saying like there's a reason he's the only Latino there. And while they don't show necessarily the initial interactions of his friends coming in, for all we know, this is all hypothetical. They could have been acting like asses from the get-go, but it also could have been like they tried to walk in and were immediately stopped, and then they started acting up out of protest.
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, like I do think them not dressing nice or whatever, if they're featured in the artwork, like I think they get a pass. Like I don't think that they have to wear a fucking tuxedo because you're trying to present them as people that in a good light, where it's like, yeah, they should be able, like Ricky said, they're clean, like they're not like,
Yeah, like this
They're-
artwork's supposed to be representative of this community, but this community is not allowed in the event.
yeah, and then you get into like selling out your community, you know, because it's like
He even
you-
says that.
who are these people buying, like who are the people that are buying his artwork and what are they
People with
buying it
money.
for? Yes,
To show that
people-
they're cultured.
He literally says, I'm selling out. I mean, he doesn't mean it literally. He means that his show is selling out. But I feel like that was a kind of heavy-handed, like, I'm selling out. I should get something out of this, right? He says
Yeah.
that in the film.
but that's the idea. And but the thing is too
But
is
that's
that
not what he says. He says, I should get something now.
why can't I get something now?
Yeah. Because greedy
But-
ass fool doesn't know how the art world works, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, he's desperate.
He's desperate as shit.
So
Yeah,
he's
die
getting
first,
he's getting
okay?
hounded for money outside of his show.
But
Yeah, that
he
other dude was his, like...
But he was getting
hero
the money
money.
so they can go get high.
Well, actually, initially they were telling him he needed to get money because the guy that was standing outside, who is his dealer, he owes that dude like 4 Gs at that moment.
Yeah.
That was the start of him need. Like that guy was there to collect debt. The other two were there to fuck around.
Yeah, what I was trying to reference at the beginning of the podcast was I feel like a lot of the stuff, I mean, it was a $35 million movie. It had a huge cast. It shot on location. I don't know how they spent the money, you know, like what the budget was. But it does, I wonder, the reason why I brought up that it was interesting that this was a top-down project, that they were like, hey, let's make a, you know, Latino gangster movie. Like that, we need one, you know. I do wonder if that led to like a lot of negligence or like, well, we kind of said that about how like they probably had the actors ham it up, you know, to,
Yeah.
like this is what Mexicans sound like, and I think that's part of what makes it a cult classic. Is like I do think a lot of Mexicans, a lot of Latinos like this movie, but we joke about it. We make fun of the lines. I don't think that these people are revered for the roles that they play, or like the roles that their characters play and what they do, but it's just like it's entertaining. It's the same type of entertainment as like fucking Paulie from The Sopranos.
Right.
It's like he's a gangster, he kills people, but he also says some of the funniest shit, in the show. And like fucking Popeye in this movie is just fucking flooded with funny ass lines. Well, we're talking about how in the 90s there was a surge in like these like crime movies, gangster movies, drug movies.
Anti.
Well, yeah.
But I think that's because like even people our age were like dealing with that and grew up with even just not fully in it, but the residuals of that. Because like I grew up like we joked about like hood adjacent stuff. Like I grew up kind of hood adjacent for a time. My sister was kind of like in the vicinity of that lifestyle. I've had friends that were in that lifestyle. And we still dealt with the ramifications of like gang violence decreasing, but still being around. And it's hard not to see every character because I feel like I had a friend that ended up going down that path. I had my sister that she never went that far deep, but like she dealt with people like that and how to get out of that. And like I even had a buddy go in and out of county that I had to separate my friendship with eventually because like I remember like going to hang out with them and we were like 20 maybe or something, 20, 21. And I went to go smoke weed with them or something. And his friends who were more about like that lifestyle were like, who's this guy? Where do you know him from? And I was like, oh, I can't hang out here. And it's like, you see people split paths and then like nothing, like it's still like, you still have like some survivor's guilt to see people go down that path. I looked through, there's like, I'm going through like a Rolodex. Not that I have a lot of people that went down that path, but people that like, kind of were friends with these people or I kind of knew them. And it's like, it, as campy as this movie is, it does humanize this experience. Cause I've had friends that like went down this path or kind of got out of it or whatever, who I just saw as smart, funny, creative. And it's like, you don't see that necessarily if you're an outsider. And you just see like these friends that were like one of my buddies, like he won a award for poetry and he ended up in county. And it's like, it's not because like he didn't have anything to offer. It's because like he was hurtled down a path, and
we see that in Cruz. He wins the award for being an artist.
Yeah.
And then he ends up killing his little brother on purpose.
But that's the thing too, is that like these people, there's always a thing in like these communities, right? Where I witnessed this a lot as somebody who like didn't smoke weed in high school or who didn't do drugs. There's a thing when people like that are like into that and they find out like you don't do that. They're like, oh, that's good, that's cool. Like don't like keep that up. And I think that for like communities like this, like people that have a way out, I think that's how they saw like Cruz's character is having a way out.
Yeah.
And so throughout the movie, they're telling him like, hey, you better still be painting, like keep up with your art because that's going to be your thing.
your
That's
ticket.
even what Montana? Was that his name, Montana?
Yeah.
That's what that dude was telling Miklo in the movie when he got his parole. Like he's
Yeah.
like, you have a chance to make the difference and be different. And I think that's who inspired him to be like, hey, I'm trying to be on my game.
Right.
Yeah, his
Even
whole
though
thing
he
was like,
ended up killing him in the long run.
yeah, his whole thing was like, I have to do this because this is how I survive now. But you have an opportunity to not reach that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the thing of just like this is the circumstance, and I think that concept has like carried out like historically. It's like it's progressed, like we've been talking about. It's like this gang culture is not gone, but it has died down, and I think that's why when we see these depictions of like reformed gang members or ex-gang members or current gang members, we see them as family, we see them as friends and loved ones, and like we humanize them in that way because like these are real people. But it's like not everything has changed, like not everything has gained progress. There's still a lack of opportunity for some people, although it is growing.
Yeah.
And like we are seeing more representation in media, we are seeing more admissions in higher education and home ownership and on and on, but it is a thing of that residual mindset of survival. And I think that was the big part of this movie, like to take away from, is like that's the villain of the movie is the this intangible, like, I wouldn't even call it white supremacy, but it is just like their survival mentality of like, these are the things that they have to do to get by.
The machine.
Yeah.
Bert Kreischer, he's the villain.
Final thoughts on the movie, Ryan?
Oh,
Now should
What?
have been when I said that 10 out of
Jerry
10.
Springer just died.
I don't care.
That was like a week ago.
Wow.
Hey, blood in, blood out. Am I right?
I'm cutting all this, you insensitive bastards.
Jerry Springer
fight?
exploited like
Yeah.
so many people.
He was a legend. We're Latino, dude. You gotta respect Jerry Springer.
There's a story about how he had on a
Wait. We shouldn't do this.
There's
This
a-
should be Patreon stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with like all of the reviews that I've seen of this film. Mikola did not have to suck that finger for that long.
Facts.
He's trying to build trust.
That's like the number one criticism that I keep finding over and over. Everyone hates how much he sucks that finger.
It's such an awkward, unnecessary thing for him to do.
Right? And he's so good at it immediately.
The finger suck was crazy. A crazy move on his part.
I wonder how much chonchon was left on the cutting floor. Josh, that was Josh's joke. I stole Josh's joke. It's such a good joke. I was waiting for you to say it. You didn't. I took my chance.
This whole time to drop another chon chon line.
Waiting for that chon.
I think that this movie shows that family doesn't really matter when it comes down to serious things. The family falls apart at the first sign of trouble. The dad was like, "You're not my son. I hate you. You're my brother. You're not my brother. We're half brothers. We're not brothers at all. I don't have a leg." It's all over the place.
They're literally falling apart.
Yeah, they're literally falling apart.
They're victims of circumstance. Again, like these people are fighting against. They have to make these hard stances because like you brought drugs into this house.
But it's also like old, like you're saying that there's like it's kind of inconsistent, but they eventually end up with the people that chose the same thing.
Facts.
Even if it took forever, even if it was a lot of pain, people ended up where they wanted to end up. It's no guarantee, but a lot of these characters did eventually.
One thing that we didn't really talk about to that point is addiction, right?
Yeah.
Everybody throughout the whole film, Cruz is struggling with addiction, and his family is like looking down on him for it. But like that fool broke his fucking back. Like, you know what I mean? Like he lives with that pain. He had a traumatic event happen to him. First of all, just the mental trauma from being jumped, and then having the physical trauma, and then having to carry that with him, and having the pressures of being, you know, the artist and this lifestyle and all this stuff. All of that like feeds into his addiction, and I think the views around addiction at the time were very much like drugs are evil, drugs are bad. If you do them, you're a bad person. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that, you know, my views of drugs are that they're dangerous, but if you do them, that doesn't make you a bad person. And I think that had they lived in a world where we supported people through their addictions, then he wouldn't be a lot of that stuff could have been avoided.
Cry me a river.
The LA River.
He made the
Tell the movie in.
That's right. He chose those things, dude.
He
Regardless,
didn't choose to get jumped and
Yeah,
to
there's
get
the thing.
addicted
chose
to
the lifestyle.
He didn't choose to get addicted
didn't,
to
though.
painkillers. He had
drawn
that
into it.
Nah, dude. His homie was like, "Here you go," and he was like, "Give me another one."
Because his back is killing him.
because
Well,
he
that's the
has
thing.
pain.
I understand what you're saying.
Didn't you
Wait,
hear
real
the
quick,
doctor?
Real quick. Because there's a thing that's like known as the pharmaceutical pipeline of like that's one of the leading causes of people that develop that habit is they don't have the insurance for proper surgeries or physical therapy. So they're just given a shit ton of painkillers and then they get hooked on them because there's no follow-up treatment. They're just sent home with pills. And then the refills run out. So they have to find something else. So they look for like the closest things that are adjacent.
I don't know. I think what I do is I just think of drug addicts that I've known in my life, and then they're the ones being like, "Oh, I'm gonna do more drugs." They got options, they got stuff to do, and they chose. So like I was saying, I put a bunch of people I know in these situations. So I guess that's kind of what I'm doing.
You do choose, but
You 100% choose.
You
I
do
didn't falter
choose,
on
but
it.
these
But
things are.
addiction
It takes your brain over.
addiction literally changes your brain and changes your thinking.
And actually, there is two studies done. The original one was a study of rats who, they had the water tank full of they laced it with like some
Like
kind
Coke.
of narcotic, and the rat every time it would get bored would come to the drinking water, and after a while it would continue. It would just sit there and wait till it had the craving and then drink more water. But there was a second study
Yes.
where given enough proper motivation therapy and other options, they put the rat in with other rats that were not addicted. They put the rat in with things to physically do to fill up its day, and it was less inclined to become addicted because it had support. It had a system of community, and it worked like 97% or something.
Yeah, and that's part of why Cruz was eventually able to get better and accept everything that happened and see the beauty of that moment of who they were and where they were. Partly because his family finally forgave him. Like if his family never chose to forgive him and be there for him,
Yeah.
he might have still been an addict and ended up dead in the street.
In
Wait,
fact,
hold on. Did they show him stop being an addict?
yeah,
It's implied
it's
that when
implied
he-
that he's clean at the end of the film. But that's actually
Oh,
also
he says
there's
that
a
I
Cut
did
his
that for
lung.
10 years.
there's a point that I feel like is more viscerally shown where his story stops being told once his family abandons him. Like the movie itself abandons him once he becomes an addict, and he's only popping up as parts of everyone else's story.
Symbol.
Message. Shout out to the Wayans brothers.
Yeah.
And that's like a thing that's like literally part of the story is that it's not part of the story. It's like it's the part that you don't look at so you don't see him until he's recovered, and nobody really knows what he actually went through. They literally only ever see him painting because that's how people remember him, is he's a drug addict and he loves to paint.
Maybe I am just stuck in the time period I grew up in, and it's
We're
one
like
of those
the same
things of like, it's the final stop is with you and addiction. You got to be like, I'm gotta stop doing drugs.
And that's what happened to him.
Yeah, no, I'm
But
just
it
saying
wasn't-
that you were saying like addiction's not a choice.
Well,
And I was
it's
saying
more
stopping
saying
addiction is a choice.
Support and community also play a factor into recovery.
Sure.
Is more what we're saying. Oh, I don't want to speak for Dominic, but
I
that's
don't
what I'm
disagree
saying.
with that statement.
I mean, I'm not saying that addiction isn't a choice, but there's things to take into account that are bigger than just this is a choice.
Some people literally have a laundry list of traumas to overcome before they get to a place where someone else has a choice.
Oh, yeah.
It's not about shirking accountability for that person. It's more just about holding them accountable, but also understanding that this is a thing happening to them as much as it is that they are doing.
There was no real indication that they had a hard life. Cruz, his dad was in the military. His little brother was in school. They were doing good.
Well-
They had a business. He worked painting cars. He chose to go out what his dad left, and they stole that person's car. He knew it was the wrong thing to do because he said it, and he let his friends talk him into it.
That's also the thing that, like, you always have to bring. This doesn't completely excuse it, but you also have to bring yourself back to they're all like 16 to 18 at this time. Like,
you
teenagers are
wouldn't
dumb.
beat people up when you were 16?
No.
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 But people did.
Yeah, I know. Those fools made bad decisions.
Yeah.
But that's,
Choices.
That's
Yeah.
why I was bringing it back to that statement before of like that's the thing about gang life is like a lot of these people are brought into this at a young age, and that I think is the one thing that's not only clouding the ideals or the idea of gang life, but it's also misrepresenting it of like the people that these stories are about are actually a lot younger than they're being depicted as, and B, the people that are identifying with these characters are seeing a representation of a full-grown person who thinks they know what they're doing.
They say it in the movie, though. You never see an old drug dealer. It's not
But
a
all
thing.
of those dudes were like in their 30s,
Yeah.
In the movie, you mean?
like the actors.
Yeah, they're.
Yeah, yeah.
And that
went to
dude
acting
himself was
school,
like-
Juilliard.
Yeah.
Fucking,
Fouliard.
those fools are rich. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I mean, again, the biggest thing for me in that whole conversation piece is just like addiction. The family and the parent. I mean, also taking into consideration the trauma that the parents had of losing their youngest son to drugs. Of course, they're gonna be angry with him and want to cut him out, because they're gonna. Not only are you doing drugs, not only are you bringing drugs into the house, but you fucking killed your brother, and like that. That's super traumatic for the whole family. It's not unreasonable to assume to see them decide to make that switch and decide to cut them out of their life.
Again, I believe in personal choices, so I think the brother killed himself.
The little kid.
He chose. He knew the deal. They were like,
He
"Don't
said
be
so.
around."
He knew what was down.
But he
That was a
didn't.
reference to
I
the
mean,
scene.
he's
I mean,
a
he didn't
fucking
get
kid.
it, but he
That
fucked
was a
around and
joke.
found out.
But
I want to be
fuck around with the
super
fuck
clear
around.
that was a joke. He said in the scene, he goes, "I know what's down," and that was the reference.
Yeah,
And it was him at the end of the scene. We gotta wrap this up.
yeah.
Final thoughts.
Ricky, go.
I loved it.
If you've made it this far, how many fingers would you have sucked?
That was what I was going to say.
Do you have any final thoughts on the movie, Ricky?
I don't know. I hadn't seen it in literally like 16 years. And I'm realizing, like, looking back, I have a lot more to connect with. Yeah, it's campy. Yeah, the acting's a little not great. But the storytelling I still found very good. And, of course, I don't relate to the extremes of it, but I still relate.
Yeah, I think having been somebody, I mean, we all have, everybody's grown up with some form of trauma, for sure. I think seeing Latinos being depicted as dealing with living in fucking LA and like living a traumatic life, and then figuring out how to cope with that. I do connect with a lot. I'm not gonna fucking go and join a gang, you know.
Yeah.
You're already in a gang, dog.
Dog.
Un Poquito gang.
I'm not gonna go-
UPG, dog.
UPC?
You know,
I see you, Pete.
stupid, but yeah, like Ricky said, I do relate to the story elements a lot, and I see why like this movie has kind of stood the test of time and like has grown, you know, popularity within the community. And if you haven't seen it, again, it's very campy. There's a lot of bad acting. There's a lot of funny lines.
It's a good laugh.
You're gonna find it hard to get over how much this dude looks like Michael J. Fox. But once you get past that, it's worth it.
Yeah, but I definitely do think it's worth checking out.
Those
And from us at Un Poquito.
Don't
do
fly.
Welcome to the addendum. Hope you guys liked the discussion. Just a couple things that I wanted to touch on that we kind of glossed over. One being that this story was made by non-Latinos. It was all white people. I touched on that when I talked about how it was a top-down procedure. But the story itself was based on the life of Jimmy Santiago Baca, who was a poet. He became a poet while imprisoned in San Quentin, I believe. He was arrested for drug possession, so he spent, I believe, 5 years in prison. And he started writing his life story. And my understanding was that he was pitching this around, and also my understanding is that Taylor Hackford also wanted to make a movie about Latino gangsters. So it kind of worked hand in hand. Now, the way that Jimmy tells it is that he wrote all the lines in the script, and that the other two writers, credited as Jeremy Iacone and Floyd Mutrux, share credit with him. The story is credited to Ross Thomas. So what I think happened is that Jimmy Baca wrote this script, and then the producers were like, nobody knows who this guy is. We can't make a movie by some. There's also probably something about the WGA in there, that you needed somebody that's part of the union or the guild, to have this movie made by a major studio. So what I think happened is that he wrote most of it. They took this guy's story, they took like what he wrote, and then they were like, oh, but we know how to make a movie. We know how to write a script, like to use film language. And they were the ones that really pieced together this project. And it's also interesting because I think that that's one of the reasons why the dialogue is so campy. One of two things probably happen is that either Jimmy Baca really did write all the lines of dialogue and they just kept with it as authentic because he is Chicano. So either that happened and the dialogue is so campy because he doesn't have any screenwriting experience and they were just like, I guess this is how Mexicans talk. Or the white writers took these guys' stories and they wrote the dialogue and they were like, this is how we think Mexicans talk. Josh is pointing out that's how a lot of Mexicans talk, especially during that time. It would have made sense in the 90s, but it's, for me, it's the dialogue is campy, the acting is campy, everything's over the top. So when we did a review for Hanging with the Homeboys, I had posited a theory that a lot of the reasons why we see people of color, Latinos in films during the 90s and the 80s, and how those movies, that acting style is a little bit more over the top. It's way less subtle than most white movies at the time. I think that's because most of the work that brown actors could get were in the theater, where you do make a lot of bigger moves. You know, your acting is a lot broader. That's just a theory. I don't know if there's any truth in that, but I feel like that's one of the things that could happen. Or, you know, like I said, the white production kind of just filled in the blanks like on their own of like what they thought would make sense. And you have a lot of like Latinos that are just like happy to be working and like excited to be part of this project. You know, not to be condescending to everybody involved, because the people that are involved in the movie are very passionate about this movie. Like they're very proud of it. You know, it's a really cool piece of cinematic history. But one thing that I thought was interesting is in this discussion, Josh brought up a really good point when he said that there's no indication that any of these people had a bad life. They kind of just chose being, they kind of just chose like to be part of street gangs, you know? And also, I think I said it as well. It's easy to hold the characters more to a higher standard of accountability because the actors look old. Like they all look like they're in their 30s, but they're supposed to be playing like in the first act of the movie, they're supposed to be playing, you know, 18 to 21 year olds. And now but we see them as like full grown, fully developed, like adults who should know better. I believe if they had used a younger cast for the first act, it might read a little bit better. But the other thing is that I think maybe I just fill in the blanks. Like this could just be a me thing. But to Josh's point, I think that a lot of people are probably filling in the blanks because it's kind of just like, oh, we know that cops are racist. We know, we've seen it. We've seen it in other media. We've seen it, you know, in life. We've heard the stories from people alive during that time. I know that my dad has told me about his experience with racist cops and like how hard it was for Latinos. When we were doing research for the Chavez Ravine and learning about the school walkouts, the beginning of the Chicano movement in the 60s, you know, we learned that Latinos were heavily discriminated against. They were mistreated by the teachers. They were hit for speaking Spanish. They were pushed into home ec and auto mechanic jobs. They were actively discouraged from going to college. So there's a lot of stuff that I think as Latinos we know and we assume. But in this movie, none of that is really evident. Like Paco becomes a cop and his partner is not really racist. His partner is played by fucking Biff from Back to the Future. We don't see the racist cops in this movie. Part of that could just be, you know, why people are making this movie and they don't feel the need to portray that, or they just don't feel compelled to portray that. yeah, I mean, it's not what this movie is about. It's not about racism. So I think it could just be a me thing. You know, I'm fully willing to accept and admit that that I'm filling in a lot of the blanks about like why fucking Paco in the beginning is being such an asshole to the cops when he pulled him over, when he was the one that stole a car and was going joyriding. Like, the cop was chill. All right, do you want to be on mic, Josh? I just think it's interesting. I think the reason I'm pointing all this stuff out is that I think it's interesting the connections that a lot of Latinos make to this movie. I do think there's a lot of people that are filling in a lot of the blanks, because this movie, Taylor Hackford also directed La Bamba, and like if you look at his IMDb, like the movies that he has directed, he kind of does this with movies. Like he paints them very broadly. Like La Bamba is moves very quickly, and a lot of the film language is just like, it's very evident when you're in a new act, and it's very evident when, oh, this is the villain of this story, or this is the major conflict of this story, or this is, you know, some storytelling device. Like he really, this is this artist's, this is this character's conflict being, you know, just constantly bombarded with all of these kind of indicators. We don't get a lot of background in these characters. They're not very complex. They're not well-rounded. They're kind of painted with a broad brush. And I think because of that, we understand the roles that they're supposed to be playing, and we understand the characters that they signify. But I think that, at least for me, I feel like I'm connecting these characters and this story to other stories that I've heard or read or seen, other movies that I've watched, other books. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It's definitely, you know, an interesting technique by the director to do this. I don't think that we get a lot of information. We kind of have to fill in the gaps. One of the ways that we see this like kind of poor character development is when Paco, who's actually, you know, on paper is a good guy. Like he's trying to right the wrong of his past. He's trying to make up for his half brother getting attacked, his younger brother dying to drugs, you know, his cousin going to prison. He's trying to end crime, gangs, drugs in his community. That's why he becomes a cop. But also he, you know, it's kind of implied, and maybe it is something that's not implied and I'm just reading into it, but he doesn't treat his community with a lot of compassion. He does treat them as criminals, and as not just criminals because, you know, I'm not going to fucking act like they're not criminals, like they're not committing crimes, but he doesn't treat his community with compassion. He treats it like the people as the enemy, as what's wrong with the community. And I think it's easy for me to say that in a modern lens, to see this through a modern lens, and to say like, hey, maybe have some compassion for these people and like the environment that they're in. But again, it's like all of that stuff that I'm talking about, of like the conditions of the community and the conditions of the people that are turning to crime, we don't see that in the movie. This is not The Wire. This is not like, hey, let's try to understand crime more. It's like, oh, let's try to put an end to gangs and drugs and throw everybody in prison, which is interesting through Miklo's story, because again, like a lot of that stuff I think is kind of, I'm filling in a lot of the gaps, and that's what's making me enjoy the movie more, is not so much what we're actually seeing, it's the information that I'm putting in, because there's a lack of information throughout the movie. Be that as it may, I think it's still worth watching. It's a good movie. It's entertaining. It's long as shit, so make sure that you set out the time. Take some breaks. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Let us know if there's something that we didn't talk about in this movie that you thought was worth pointing out, whether it's the history of the movie, any of the actors, what do you think about the legacy of the movie? Let us know in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you. All right, everybody. Don't fly.